Hello and welcome to Antique Antics with me, Mark Fraser. Today I thought we'd take an impartial look at buying in auction. The reason I say impartial is because there's many YouTube videos from auctioneers who are telling you should be buying in auction, but of course they have a loaded agenda, whereas I just happen to have worked in an auction room once, so I know how it works, etc, etc. There are many people today who are actually scared of going to auction. You'd be surprised the amount of people I talk to who say, oh, you work in an auction room. Do you know what? I've never been to an auction. And this is people in their 50s or 60s. And when I ask them why, they say, oh, I don't know, it all seems a bit scary to me. And I'm here to tell you that no, it's not. It's actually very, very simple. So, what do people get scared about? I think the oldest fear, of course, is that they're going to go into an auction room, sit down and scratch their nose and end up buying a grand piano. It doesn't actually work like that at all. It's very, very clear. The days are gone where people pull an earlobe or scratch their nose to indicate that they're bidding. It does still happen at some agricultural auctions, but at a standard public auction selling general furniture or indeed antiques, that doesn't really happen. If anything, you have to really overdo the bidding to make the auctioneer see you. So that's something you really don't need to worry about. So how does it work? Generally speaking, here in the UK anyway, you would go and have a look around the auction, and then if you decided to attend on the day, you would need to register, which basically means you go along, you give your details, and they would then give you a bidding number or a bidding paddle with a number on. Now, this is just to make things go smoothly. When I started in the business, you actually had to say your name, but I think that in those days things were a lot more trusting, and you could just say your name and they'd assume you'd come along and pay after the sale. But they do need your details before now. If you can't make the sale, you can leave a bid with the auctioneer. This is known as a commission bid. Now you'll see that term mentioned in some of these antique auction programs on TV, and if you wondered what it was, it just basically means that you have commissioned the auctioneers to bid for you. Now you may decide, you may walk in on a viewing day and you see let's say a chest of drawers you fancy, and the estimate is 60 to 90 pounds. And you think to yourself, well, that seems very reasonable. I think I'd go a little bit more. So you're deciding you're going to leave £100 on it. Now, the tendency is, because one or two people, more than one or two people, have had what they think are bad experiences, that they leave £100 and end up paying £100 exactly for it. They think that the auctioneer has run them up to their bid. I'd like to think that doesn't happen much these days. Certainly the auctioneers that I worked for many years, that just didn't happen. Your buyers are your lifeblood. You have to treat them well. So, basically, if you leave £100 on something and the last bid in the room is £70 or £80, you will get it for the next bid, whatever the increments are at the time. So if the bidding had gone 65, 70, 75, 80, he's looking for another bid, that's your bid. So you need not worry. I like to think you need not worry about being run up to every figure you've left. I have heard horror stories where people have left 10 bids and they bought all 10 lots, bang on their maximum figure. That does sound a bit fishy, and I'd be a bit dubious about that particular auctioneer. Although it can happen, obviously. The reason I say it can happen is if you look at the auctioneer's estimates, you like to think they know what they're doing. So if they're saying something's going to make 60 to 80 pounds and you leave bang on the middle estimate of 70 pounds, and then your next lot is estimated at 100 to 150 and you leave 125 pounds, if you get it on your exact bid on each of those, well, it's hardly surprising. The auctioneer knows the price that things should make, and it's right on the average price. But anyway, to put your mind at rest, you should not be run up to your maximum figure. So that's leaving a bid with a commission. You can also, in most auction rooms these days, and I have to say any auction room worth their salt who is doing the job properly, you can bid online. Now, a few years ago when this became the norm, there were glitches. You'd find that the internet link would suddenly falter and you'd be bidding for something you desperately wanted, and lo and behold, before you know it, the internet's gone down and you've missed it. So a lot of people became dubious about bidding online. That, largely speaking, has now been completely ironed out. So I'd like to think that most auctioneers, you will not lose the internet signal. It can happen, of course, that can happen in any walk of life, but I like to think it wouldn't. That said, it shows, doesn't it, that if you can attend the auction and bid yourself, do it, because that way you know you're perfectly safe. You're not going to get run up to your maximum figure because the auctioneer doesn't know it, and the internet's not going to break down. So obviously, if you can, do attend the sale. The only other thing I've got to talk about, which some people really aren't aware of when they go to buy an auction, is what's known as the buyer's premium. And it leaves a bad taste in the mouth with a lot of seasoned dealers and public that have been going to auction for many years. When I started in the trade 40 years ago, there was no such thing as a buyer's premium. The only commission that was paid was by the seller. So when the hammer went down, if it was £100, that's all you paid. Then bit by bit, in the late 70s, early 80s, the big boys, that's Christie's, Sotheby's, brought in a buyer's premium. And everybody thought, well, this is a bit cheeky. They're taking from the buyer and from the seller. That's a bit cheeky. But the reason they did it was because at the time they could lower their seller commission slightly to make it more easier, or to make it better for the vendor to go to them rather than to a competitor, because the seller commission had come down. Sadly, what happened then was most provincial auctioneers who held off for a long time from introducing buyer's premium eventually had to, because one by one their competitors in the provinces, they were bringing in the buyer's premium, so reducing their vendors' commission, so the vendors were going to them. So it became a vicious circle, and eventually everybody had a vendor's commission and a buyer's premium. So always be aware that if a buyer's premium is advertised, and they should have it clearly displayed in an auction room, 15% buyer's premium or 20% buyer's premium. Some are even more now, so do beware, because it can add on a heck of a wedge of money to your hammer price. If you think in terms of this, if you paid £100 for something, you've then got your buyer's premium to add on, which may, let's say in this case it's 20%. You've then got that on the buyer's premium, not on the hammer price, just on the buyer's premium. So that immediately takes you up to about £125. Now, if you weren't aware of this buyer's premium and your maximum figure was £100, that'd give you a bit of a shock, wouldn't it? To go up to the counter to pay and you're suddenly told that's £125. So always be aware that there probably is a buyer's premium. Now, one other thing I should mention here, and it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally if the vendor that's selling something in an auction is selling in the course of business, let's say an office that is moving a lot of their furniture out, and so it tends to be more in that type of auction, a commercial auction rather than a standard furniture auction you might go along to, although it does happen there. You may well have VAT on the hammer price, and if that happens, suddenly your bargain lot suddenly isn't such a bargain lot, because if you've paid £100 for it, you've got VAT to add on to the £100, which is 20%, so that's £120. You've then got the buyer's premium to add on, which is potentially another £25. It suddenly becomes £145 that you've paid rather than £100. So always be aware, buyer's premium, VAT on the buyer's premium, and if in the catalogue it's got at the end of the description brackets plus VAT, really look out. One other thing I should mention when we're talking about things added on to the price is we spoke briefly about internet bidding. Now, these are organised by separate companies. They're not done by the auctioneers themselves. The auctioneer uses other companies to organise the internet bidding, and they do make a charge as well if you buy something. It's not much, I think it's about 2% on average, so that's something else. So if you bid online, you will have a small percentage to pay as well. So all in all, the worst case scenario, I suppose, is that you buy something online, you're not aware of the buyer's premium, there's VAT on it, and you have to pay the 2% to the people organising the internet bids. It doesn't actually sound that good to buy an auction, does it? But believe you me, you should do. If you've never been to an auction, you must go. There are bargains to be had, there's money to be made, but you must be very wary about how much you pay. So, I've told you about buying in auction. Next time, I think we'll talk about selling in auction, because believe it or not, it's a good way of buying, but it's also the best way of selling. So until the next time, bye bye.